Episode 66, Empire's End. A stillness hung over what was left of Kupa Central as the sun rose over the Kupa Empire's once mighty capital for the first time. The last fires were being extinguished, and one of the turrets on the Imperial Citadel crumbled. The citadel's huge dome was cracked right down the center, although so much had happened to the city none could tell what had done it. Smoke pouring from 100 blasted holes, the Kupa dominance finally gave up the fight, coming to a rest on the ground as its engines stilled for the last time. What remained of the Seven Stars fleet was in full retreat. Despite their advanced technology, the combined forces had driven them back. When Cobal awoke, he was lying in a street covered in debris and ashes. The first sight he saw as he opened his eyes was a ripped and frayed Kupa Empire flag, being blown away by a slight breeze. Groaning from the effort, he stood up and looked around. Naturally, the city street looked like a war zone. Tanks belonging to all of the armies, in attention to some star shrooms and a Neo-Empire mech, littered the streets. As Cobal walked down the deserted road, he even saw a full Neo-Empire battleship clogging the streets with ugly dents in its shiny futuristic hull. The thunderous echoes of cannon fire were nowhere to be heard. Even the Comet Observatory was gone from the sky, seemingly vanished into thin air. Perhaps its builders had spirited it away to the depths of the cosmos, so its great damage could be repaired. Wow! Cobal thought as he continued down the empty street, past a glitching electronic billboard that still flashed the image of Emperor Bowser every now and then. "Hey!" he cried out, his voice echoing throughout the streets. "We won, didn't we? We won!" As Cobal moved into another street, more people took notice of him, people who seemed to be from all the allied armies. A Kupa Troopa took off his grey Neo-Empire uniform and threw it on the ground, forgetting about it as he inquired to a toad about his arm injury. There were toads passing around mushrooms to Kupas, and healing magic Kupas flying around on their brooms, sealing up wounds on toads with their glowing wands. It looked like everybody had gotten so wrapped up in fighting together, they'd all forgotten they were supposed to be enemies. "Cobal!" came a voice, and he looked to see Shroomer running towards him, crying tears of happiness. Plodder, Masco, and Cooperly were behind him, all of them looking considerably battered but still on their feet. "There you are! We were worried you were dead." "Nah, this guy's still fighting," he laughed, coming towards the toad and clapping him on the shoulder. He felt pain rush through his body. "Well, kind of, at least. Son, one day, when all the handsome young'uns in this battle grow as old as I am," Cooperly smiled, "they'll tell stories about you. Facing down Antonio like that. My, I didn't even think it was possible." Cobal blushed with the praise as Masco and Plodder excitedly told him about the battles they had fought against the Seven Stars forces. It seemed like no matter where they had fought, everyone had done something heroic today in this battle at Kupa Central. "Have any of you seen Luigi?" he asked. Shroomer shook his head. "No. I don't think so, Cobal. Last time I saw, he was battling that Antonio man clear across the sky. It was amazing. I can't believe I got to see the Mario brothers in action." Cobal nodded as he and the others made their way down the street, taking shortcuts around piles of debris or downed war machines along the way. He hoped Luigi was all right. Not like King K. Rool. He kept his eyes low as he walked, remembering the Kremlin king in silence. He had been a wild warrior, that K. Rool, someone full of admirable zeal for life despite his faults. If only they could have known each other in a more peaceful time, he bet that old crocodile could have thrown an amazing party. He grinned at the thought, remembering K. Rool's mad-looking wild-eyed stare. Yup. What a guy, that King K. Rool. What a guy. It took a long time before the group could find any news of Luigi, and they had to walk through a huge amount of the city to discover it. In the end, they discovered a big crowd in a downtown intersection, gathered around something. At closer glance, Cobalt realized it was Luigi, sitting on a chunk of rock with Princess Peach and Daisy beside him. He could make out Strike and Peasley too, both of them with respectful and reverent looks on their face for K. Rool and the others who had given their life to help defeat 7 Stars. Yoshi and the Toad Brigade looked on, relieved to be out of the fighting, while he could see Dream Bird in the background, tending to the Z-Keeper's wounds as the large bird sat on the ground, his colorful feathers singed. He had taken a full-on light spear from Antonio, after all, something which would have killed anyone not as powerful as him. All the old partners were also there, covered in cuts and scars, including his father, who ran towards him and gave him a hug.
"That was some mighty good fighting up there, kid."
He grinned.
"I can tell the champ's blood runs in your veins."
"Yeah." Cobalt nodded, feeling his eyes get watery. His dad, the legendary Great Gonzalez Jr.? Now that the war was over, they could finally start getting to know each other, couldn't they? Now that there was no more fighting, they could do all the things that fathers and sons ought to do. After all, they had all the time in the world. Cobalt saw Luigi look up at him and smile, and he met his mentor's gaze. Maybe, at last, he could stop fighting for a while. Luigi held Daisy's arm as if he could never let it go. He was so tired he could barely keep himself up, but he managed to smile at the people who had given it their all to help him. He could scarcely believe what had happened. 7 Stars and all their plans had been foiled, and the war against the Koopas. He noted several of Bowser's minions in the crowd. While he didn't quite know how things would all end up, somehow he didn't think they'd all of a sudden start fighting each other again after everyone recovered.
"Those were some moves you had up there,"
Daisy smiled.
"When did my sweet, timid Luigi become so powerful?"
Luigi chuckled with embarrassment. That fight had taken everything he had got and then more. He still had no idea how he had managed to win. Antonio was gone now. He had been entrapped by powerful seals by all of the most powerful Magic Koopas in the Empire, and was currently incarcerated. Even after he regained consciousness, not even his powerful would be able to break him out. Regarding the other leaders of 7 Stars, he had learned that Skulls was dead, and that Giovanni had been discovered lying unconscious on one of the roads after being knocked off his airship by a magic blast, and had been arrested after being bound with similar magic seals. The organization had been completely crippled, its surviving ships fleeing. He doubted it would be much of a threat anymore, likely, it would end up breaking apart entirely with all of its central leaders. Captain Toad, whose arm was in a sling, was reporting things to Princess Peach, who was standing nearby. The battle had been a costly one, and Peach was making sure that everyone who had given their life in the fight against the Koopa Empire and 7 Stars would be given full honors.
"Thank you, Luigi,"
she said, turning towards him and smiled.
"You helped turn my people into heroes."
Suddenly Toadette ran over towards them, her face excited.
"Peach! Luigi!"
she exclaimed, out of breath.
"We've found Mario!"
Luigi found his brother lying on the grass in a park, leaves drifting around her as the sun shone down on his red cap. There was no sign of a fall at all, almost as if he had magically floated down somehow. As Luigi knelt down and touched his brother's hand, Mario's eyes flickered open.
Luigi,"
he said.
"We A1, right?"
Luigi smiled as he took his brother's hand and squeezed it tight. The sun was warm and there was the fresh smell of new growth on the wind.
Yeah, brother. We won.
We won, and now nothing will separate us again. You're not lost anymore, Mario. That life with the princess we all thought you would have when you were married. You get a second chance. And so do I. I'll take you advice, Mario. Now that Daisy and I have found each other again, I don't want us to ever be apart.
Mario!
Peach exclaimed, going to her knees and helping her husband up.
Are you hurt? Are you?
Mario scratched his head.
No.
He said, sounding surprised.
I don't think so. The Lumas. They must be healed me.
His eyes suddenly widened.
Bowser. What about Bowser, Mario?
Peach asked. Mario closed his eyes.
I need to see Junior,
he said.
Bowser. He's gone.
The Imperial Citadel, as broken as it was, still stood tall and proud on the skyline. Flags flew from the towers that were still standing, the Bowser head emblem of the Koopa Empire next to the red fungus of the Mushroom Kingdom and the soybean crest of Bean Bean. There were many more flags too, flags from nearly every nation in the mushroom world. The rays of the morning sun shone on the spikes of the Great Dome, which was covered in cracks. A few battleships flew around it, of many different designs but none of them fighting. Bowser Jr. sat on a chair in the antechamber, his eyes closed and the red cape of office draped over his shell. He could hear the sounds of countless voices behind the great doors, but none of that mattered to him. His father was dead. Perhaps Bowser had done terrible things, things which had earned him well-deserved hatred by some, but his memories of his father were nothing but good. He remembered faintly times in the far past, the excited roar Bowser had given when he had breathed his first fireball, the times where they had chased each other down the castle halls, to the Magi Koopa's frustration. He remembered how excited he had been when Bowser had told him he was ready to come on a kidnapping. He remembered his 12th birthday, when Bowser had given him the junior clown car and told him he was doing well following in his footsteps. Countless battles, countless laughs, highs and lows. He loved his father. Bowser Jr. had always known he would one day ascend to the throne. When he had been young, he'd think silly things, like how he'd outlaw homework and vegetables when he was king. Now that he was older, the burden of kingship was far more clear to him. Bowser had never quite understood it. Morton Koopa Sr. might have been good at first, until his lust for power had plunged the entire kingdom into a destructive war. To remove the Koopa Kingdom's bad reputation and bring true peace. How could he do it? Bowser Jr. wondered if his father had ever wanted peace. All he had wanted to rule the world, but after he had formed the Koopa Empire, he had never been happy. In the end, it seemed, Bowser had happier as a father than a conqueror.
As king, I'll try to be like Dad at his best,
Bowser Jr. thought.
He loved all of us. Even treated the minions like family. I'll treat the Koopa Kingdom like that. We deserve peace. Dad? And Mom? You'll be proud of me. You too, Mama Peach.
Bowser Jr. opened his eyes and rose from the chair. He noticed Ludwig leaning against a pillar by the huge wooden door, his arms crossed. Bowser Jr.'s eyes narrowed.
What are you doing here, Ludwig?
He asked.
Shouldn't you be in prison?
Ludwig sniffed.
Oh, don't you worry. As much as I hate to admit it, my wondrous campaign has come to an end. I will accept my defeat like a gentleman. Then why are you here?
Junior asked. Ludwig smiled.
There were days in my youth,
Ludwig said slowly,
when father and I were not at odds. Since he is no longer with us, I wish to do one last thing to honor him. He would want all of his children to watch you ascend to the throne.
He chuckled darkly.
Junior, I still don't believe you will be a good king. But as your resolve helped you triumph over me in combat, perhaps you are worth more than I believed. I will watch your progress with interest, Bowser Jr. Perhaps you may surprise me yet.
Bowser Jr. smiled at him. Perhaps the first real smile he had given Ludwig in more than 10 years.
Thanks, Ludwig,
he said.
No matter what you've done, you're still one of us.
Ludwig smiled, and perhaps, inside of his dark blue eyes, Junior could detect just the faintest glimmer of respect.
Junior.
Bowser Jr. heard Lemmy's voice.
We're all here.
The other Koopalings strolled into the room, along with the remaining members of High Command. Grand General Sheldon was in a wheelchair. He had suffered great injuries in the battle against the Grand Star. Cammy was there too, and she hobbled towards him with a smile on her wrinkled face.
You've grown into a fine man,
she said cheerfully.
Kamek told me you're the splitting image of your father now. He says you have the makings of a legendary king.
Now that was a bit confusing.
When did you talk to Kamek?
Junior asked the short Magic Koopa.
He's been dead for years.
Cammy flashed a mysterious smile.
Magic is a very mysterious art,
she said slowly,
understood by few.
2 Koopa trolls flung the doors open. The Koopalings, Cammy, and the High Command marched out like an honor guard as Bowser Jr. stepped onto the balcony to massive cheers. The assembly square in the courtyard was packed thicker than it ever had been, with people from the Koopa and Mushroom armies, and even Ludwig's rebels packing even the battlements. Lakitus with cameras hovered in the air, making sure this historic moment was broadcast live in every moment in the world. Bowser Jr. closed his eyes, shutting out all of the praise as he stood at the balcony's edge. In all his life, this was the moment he had most looked forward to. Up above him, his dad was watching. And his mom, too. He had to do it right. Both the ceremony, and the kingship. Cammy was speaking the ancient words that he had read over and over again in his textbook. The tale of how Koopazaroth, first of the Dragon Koopas, had united the Koopa clans together to stand against a brutal warlord who threatened them all, how the Koopas built up their kingdom and became great under the wisdom of their kings. She spoke of the Earth Elemental, the spirit who the Koopas had worshipped in the ancient times, asking it to lend him the strength to build up the kingdom into one that was strong and true. Cammy asked the blessings of the star spirits, and Junior prayed that they'd give it considering he was the son of the man who had stolen the star rod.
And now, I crown you, in the way of your ancestors, through the right handed down through the eons since Koopazaroth the Great, king of all the valleys and hills, master of the dark lands, and lord of all the Koopa clan.
Junior felt something cold touch his head. The Iron Koopa crown, an ancient relic from the days before the Shadow Queen, which was brought out in the days of the Koopa Kingdom.
I name you King Bowser too, and long may you reign.
The deafening cheers rose up, and King Bowser too opened his eyes. King. He had asked Cammy to use that title, instead of Emperor. The golden throne in the Imperial Citadel would never belong to him. The throne in his father's castle was throne enough.
People of the Mushroom World,
Bowser Jr. addressed them.
I thank you for coming here to witness this day. These last few years have been hard for all of us. Especially for those in the sectors, oppressed by us in the Koopa Empire. I am not innocent of this. None of us are. But I swear by the shells of my ancestors that I will right this wrong. The Koopa kingdom has been seen by the enemy for longer than I have been alive, during the reigns of my father and grandfather. I mean to change that. This city, Koopa Central, which was once known as New Donk, will be rebuilt through all of our efforts. This citadel will stand as a monument to the world's heroes, not to the tyranny of the Emperor. Mario brothers, heroes of the Mushroom Kingdom, I offer you my thanks, and my heartfelt apology. The Koopa Kingdom will stand strong. Those Koopa citizens who wish to remain in the sectors may do so, but they will become subjects of their new rulers. I will reign only over the land that rightfully belongs to me. After today, the Koopa troop will return to our kingdom and I will take my father's old castle as my seat of power. By official decree passed by me, King of all Koopas. The Koopa Empire is no more.
He smiled as the crowd met him with thunderous applause, and knew that, somewhere in that crowd of millions of faces, Princess Peach was smiling. Bowser had been wrong to kidnap her, wrong to think that would make her love him, but perhaps some good had come out of the whole crazy series of events. He had grown from a spoiled brat to a king. And he knew that he could have only ever have become that without the best mother a boy could wish for. Previous chapter list. Epilogue, Mushroom Kingdom Forever. Epilogue, Mushroom Kingdom Forever. The car made its way down the winding dirt road to Toad Town, past tall spotted rocks in colors of red, yellow, blue, and green and small thickets of bright leafy trees. The sun was shining up ahead, and puffy white clouds drifted lazily through the sky. White birds flew into the air with a flap of their wings as the car passed them by. In the distance, there was a crashed airship, covered by so much moss and vines one could almost think it was an oddly shaped hill. One day, not even enough of it would remain for that. The car had the look of being expensive, with the antique class of a Sarasalandi manufacturer. It was a brightly polished orange color, decorated with the flower of the royal seal. If he was to speak honestly, Luigi would have preferred the car to be in green, but, well, some sacrifices were worth it if they meant your wife's happiness. That was a thing that mattered to Luigi more than just about anything. At 50 years of age, Luigi was not yet old, and most often he felt as if he was at least 30 years younger. He sat in the plush white leather seat of the car with his hands on the wheel, as he guided the car forward. He could see Toad Town in the distance, Peach's castle rising high above it. He didn't have to be up close to know that its bright red roofs were free of tears or burns. Daisy sat beside him, her green eyes wide with excitement. Lorenzo sat in the back seat, reading a book based off his favorite TV show, Koopa Quest. While the franchise had existed in the Koopa Kingdom for years, it had only recently become popular in the Mushroom Kingdom. Things produced there were quite a bit easier to get around here these days, in general. 10-year-old Lorenzo was the splitting image of his father at that age, right down to his green shirt and overalls. Of course, he had yet to grow a mustache. The radio was on, playing a news report about the Bean Bean Kingdom.
King Peasley has praised his citizens' work on helping restore the nation to its former glory.
The newscaster reported.
He's hoping that Bean Bean City, built on the site of the old castle town which was destroyed in the war, will be able to be the site of the upcoming Mushroom World Sports Championship. Princess Peach, King Bowser of the Koopa Kingdom, and President Pauline of the Metro Kingdom have all endorsed his idea. I better give him some support, too.
Daisy laughed.
Peasley's done a great job. I bet the old Queen Bean would have been proud of him. Yeah.
Luigi nodded.
Last time I talked to him, he was working on building better relations with the Oho Oasis. He's done some amazing things to make his kingdom strong again. Think the sports committee would object to the Princess of Sarasaland competing in the championship,
Daisy laughed.
I hate missing out on things like that. You're the ruler.
Luigi shrugged.
I guess that's your decision, right? By the way, Mom, my tennis lessons start next month.
Lorenzo spoke up, closing his book.
Some of my friends were telling weird stories about the teacher, who's some weird lanky purple guy. There are stories that he used to be some kind of master thief. Wouldn't that be cool? A master thief?
Daisy asked, gazing back at her son skeptically.
I'm not sure if I want a guy like that teaching my son. Don't worry.
Luigi chuckled.
I know who he's talking about. I have a feeling he's been completely reformed.
The Wario brothers, following the war's end, had decided to give up a life of crime and enjoy their fortune in peace. Bowser Jr. had helped Luigi honor the deal he made with Wario to recruit him, although the brothers were only able to get a bit of the Imperial treasury instead of all of it. It was still a few million coins, so they only grumbled a little bit. It made Luigi happy to know that Waluigi was finally pursuing his more legal passion of tennis. He had heard Wario was thinking about using his wealth to start some kind of video game company. Now that was a weird thought.
Next,
the newscaster reported,
what is believed to be the last remaining cells of former Mega Syndicate, 7 stars, have been rooted out, courtesy of Mushroom Kingdom champion, Yoshi. The former head of the Fire Flower organization told us in an interview that he needs no fame or recognition for his deeds, and was only doing what he did for the good of the kingdom. The man behind the Neon City tragedy has expressed full regret for his actions as head of Fire Flower, and is known for his charitable work in not only rebuilding the city, but supporting the families who were affected by the destruction. He also played a major role in the rebuilding of committees in his homeland of Yoshi's Island, which were heard by the Koopa Empire.
That made Luigi smile. While he had fallen far, Yoshi had managed to raise himself back up and atone for his crimes. The last few times they had talked, he had even seemed happy, just like his old self. Luigi switched off the radio as they neared the Toad Town gates. The wall the Resistance had built to protect it was nowhere to be seen, as it was no longer necessary. As they passed underneath them, Luigi gazed at the brightly colored toad houses and the people walking past them, some of them gazing at the Princess of Sarasaland's luxurious private car, others simply chatting to each other or tending to their gardens. There was nothing left of the war-torn Toad Town. If anything, it was even more alive and bustling than before. Cars were still an oddity in Toad Town, so there wasn't much place to park. Luigi ended up parking the car near the fountain in the town square. As he got out, he admired the sculpture on the top of it. An amazing likeness of Peach, him, and Mario, with water splashing from pipe-shaped fountains underneath, glittering in the sunlight as it fell into the shallow pool around it.
Can I go up and see Bianca, Mom?
Lorenzo asked, tugging at Daisy's dress.
Of course, Lorenzo.
Daisy smiled.
Make sure to thank Uncle Mario and Auntie Peach for inviting us over, okay? Sure thing.
Lorenzo grinned, giving his mother a thumbs up. Then he ran up the sloping road to Peach's castle, past the toads who were going about their daily business in the peaceful town.
Hey, Big L!
Came a familiar voice. Luigi turned around to see Cobalt strolling towards him. The Yoshi had a more mature look to him now, and wore his shades up so you could see his eyes. He wore a red uniform with a mushroom on his breast, the uniform of the Mushroom Kingdom Army. Princess Peach had made sure to reorganize Luigi's trained resistance fights into a proper army after the war had been over. Now with trained defenders, the Mushroom Kingdom would never be taken off guard again. Toadette and Captain Toad led the army, and Cobalt and several of the others had reached quite high positions.
Cobalt.
Luigi smiled.
How are things? How your dad? Better than ever.
Cobal smiled.
I've been spending a lot of time with him, actually. He's bought this amazing house out in Poshly Heights and has been running this dojo for aspiring fighters. Some people he's trained have even reached the Glitz Pits Major League. Wow!
Luigi smiled. Nothing less could be expected from one of Mario's former partners.
Yeah.
Cobal grinned.
Dad and his friends have been living real good lives. Gumbel is a professor of archaeology at the University of Guam, just like her mentor, and flurries with her, teaching an elite acting course. Vivian's living a quiet, peaceful life in Twilight Town again, and Coops, well, you all know what's happened to him.
Luigi nodded. It had been a difficult decision for the Koopa, but under King Bowser II's request, Coops and his family had moved to the Koopa Kingdom, with Coops taking the Grand General position after Sheldon retired due to his injuries. Coops had never wanted a soldier's life, but he saw the offer as an opportunity to root out the corruption in the Koopa Troop and work towards a more peaceful world. Plus, as someone with high standing in both kingdoms, he had been a great help for peace between Mushroom and Koopa.
That's great to hear.
He grinned.
So, what's going on with you? Still keeping up with your training? Every day.
Cobal grinned.
Things aren't quite as bad as they used to be, but there's still people who need to be stopped before they can cause problems. I've been off duty for a while now. I've just been to Donkey Kong Island, for some celebration at the K. Rool statue celebration piece between the Kongs and Kremlings. Clump and Krusha have got this sort of idea that it was thanks to my good influence that K. Rool became a hero, and now Donkey Kong and the others can't stop giving me bananas.
He chuckled.
I was actually just stopping by here to say hi to Toadbert. I've been all over the kingdom, so I don't have much time to see the old man. What about the others?
Luigi asked.
Your friends? Ah, well, you know about Peasley, of course.
Cobal nodded.
As for Strike, we keep in touch, although he's all the way back in the Koopa Kingdom, of course. He's a general now, you know, and part of High Command. He and another guy, General Blue Shell, are working hard with Coops getting rid of all those bad apples in the ranks, people like the old Governor Flame. We're looking at an all-new Koopa troop, Luigi, one that's full of proper pride and honor. That's great!
Luigi exclaimed. He had heard a lot about the Koopa troop recently. It had come a long way from being Bowser's Goon Squad, even though the members still liked to jokingly refer to themselves as Bowser's Minions. Luigi glanced up at the tall tower of Peach's castle, with the mushroom flag flapping in the breeze.
I gotta see my bro now, Cobal. Stay well, okay? Yeah, you betcha I will, Luigi.
He smiled, as Luigi and Daisy began to walk away from him. Luigi looked back and they stared at each other a moment, before Cobal said,
Really? Thanks for sticking up for me, all those years ago. I've come a long way. Yeah, you have.
Luigi nodded.
Now that my bro and I are kind of retired, it's up to you to be the kingdom's superstar.
Cobal blushed with embarrassment as Luigi chuckled, walking away up the sloping path to Peach's castle. Peach's castle was a bustle of activity, brightly lit and full of toads rushing every way, dusting old pictures or carrying platters of food. Mario and Peach were standing at the top of the staircase in the main hall. Luigi couldn't see 10-year-old, blonde-haired Bianca. Most likely she and her cousin Lorenzo were getting up to some mischief.
Luigi!
Mario exclaimed, running down the stairs.
Mario!
Luigi replied, nearly being knocked down by his brother's embrace.
It's only been 3 months, you know. Sarasa lands far away, bro. 10 years, and I'm still not used to you living that far from Toad Town. I miss my little brother, Luigi.
Luigi nodded. He'd be lying if he didn't feel the same way.
How about we head to our private chambers?
Peach asked warmly.
It'll be more comfortable to talk there. Sounds great, Peach.
Daisy laughed.
Hey, did I tell you Lorenzo hit the home run in his school's baseball championship? He may look like his dad, but he's inherited a lot from his mom, too. I can't wait to hear about it.
Peach grinned.
Down here, Bianca keeps asking me when she'll be old enough to drive a cart. Let's say go, Luigi.
Mario said, ushering him up the stairs. As the Mario brothers walked through one of the castle corridors, past many Toad servants, Luigi glanced into a door leading towards a sitting room. To his surprise, both Kammy Koopa and Toadsworth were seated there, sipping tea by the fire in a comfortable den.
Congratulations to your 100th birthday, Kammy Koopa.
Toadsworth laughed, raising his teacup in salute.
Although I dare say I'll be joining you soon.
Kammy cackled.
For one entire century I've lived in this world, and this old girl doesn't seem to be slowing down yet.
She took a sip of his tea.
Huh? This is so good, our kingdoms should have made peace sooner. We've both lived through so much.
Toadsworth reflected.
The war with King Morton, the Shroob invasion, all the madness with Bowser, the Conquest War, and the Koopaling War. Dear me, that is quite a lot of wars. I hope the next era is a little more peaceful. We're in luck, Toadsworth.
Kammy grinned.
Why, I've been having tea with Merlin as of late, and he's told me his crystal ball only predicts peace and happiness for a long time. How long?
Toadsworth inquired.
Oh, at least 300 years.
Kammy replied conversationally.
It's tough to see any further into the future than that, of course. At the very least, both of our kingdoms will be free of wars and conflict for a long, long time. Ah, that warms my heart.
Toadsworth smiled.
Dear Princess Bianca deserves a life entirely free of kidnapping by ferocious Koopas.
Luigi left the den behind feeling in even more good spirits. Yup, he really had made the right choice to retire from the active hero business, although of course he wouldn't be opposed to a light-hearted adventure every now and then. By the time they caught up with the princesses, Peach and Daisy were in the spacious living room, which had blue walls decorated with designs of hills like most of the palace, as well as the luxurious red carpet and a magnificent fireplace with a huge picture of the royal family hanging over it, looking over some picture. The bright afternoon sun was shining through the large.
Hey, what's going on?
Luigi asked, walking over to his wife.
Oh, just Bowser Jr.'s family photo.
Daisy laughed.
Apparently Mario and Peach are the godparents.
Luigi looked over at the picture, which showed Bowser Jr. with his arm around a pretty Koopa girl with a gold-colored shell, significantly smaller than him of course. She held in her arms a tiny baby Koopa, who had the same face his father had had when he was young, his spiked shell a magnificent gold. Luigi noticed that behind the Koopa family was another family picture, one of Bowser with a red-haired Koopa woman dressed in a fiery orange dress. He recognized it instantly from Kammy's vision. It seemed like the Koopa Kingdom could finally acknowledge Queen Laveria's existence again.
Ah, that's sweet.
He grinned.
What's his name? Bowser 3, if you would believe that. Yeah, the Koopas aren't the best at coming up with original names. Maybe I'll teach him how to jump like me.
Mario exclaimed excitedly.
Imagine that, Peach. a Koopa prince jumping like a Mario bro. That would be a sight, alright.
Peach giggled.
How's the Koopa family doing, anyway?
Daisy asked conversationally.
I mean, I haven't heard anything about the Koopalings for a while, although Morton still sends me birthday gifts, of course. I hear he's started a construction company. Well, Lemmy started a film company.
Peach replied.
I've seen some of his comedies. I've always known he was more suited to making people laugh than fighting. Iggy's helping Junior run the kingdom, while Wendy's enjoying the high society life, like she always has. Really, Larry should be in prison, like Roy, but of course he managed to scam his way out. He's now in charge of one of the most powerful corporations in the kingdom. But don't worry. While I'm sure he's as shady as ever, he's definitely learned his lesson about trying to steal power. We shouldn't expect more from him than some tax fraud. Roy. Well, as I said, he's in jail, but he's actually doing really well there. Fits in with the others, I guess. He kind of runs the place and keeps the other roughs in order. Hopefully, by the time he serves his sentence, he'll be a reformed Koopa. What about Ludwig?
Luigi asked.
Ludwig?
Peach replied.
He's in house arrest in his castle in the Koopa Kingdom. Perhaps he'll get out someday, but given the serious nature of his crimes, it's likely to be a very long sentence. He's been doing surprisingly well, though. He's been composing some beautiful symphonies, and he's made scientific breakthroughs which will be able to lead to loads of good things. It seems he's told himself that if he can't be the Koopa Kingdom's greatest king, he can at least be its greatest scientist and musician. He's on surprisingly good terms with Junior, and I've heard that he sends some extravagant smashing device to Roy on his birthday every year. Supposedly as a way to make up for something terrible that happened between them, back in the war. Really, he doesn't seem to nurse too many grudges anymore. That's good. Luigi smiled. Somehow, he didn't think Bowser's eldest son would be a threat again.
The feast Princess Peach had held was classic Mushroom Kingdom hospitality, and the spaghetti and the past would remain in Luigi's memory for a long time yet. Taking a brief break from the dancing in the ballroom, Mario and Luigi stood together on a balcony, holding glasses of Chuck Cola-Cola, the best vintage, a gift from King Peasley himself, as they stared out over the houses of Toad Town, the sun setting on the horizon.
It's a beautiful kingdom, isn't it, bro?
Luigi smiled, looking down at the happy town lit by its mushroom-shaped street lamps which shone off the bright roofs of the houses, still filled by cheerful townspeople. He could still remembered what it had looked like 10 years ago, ruined and broken down by the Koopa forces.
Life's a good, Luigi.
Mario agreed, sipping his Chuck Cola-Cola.
I can never say it too many times. Thank you for everything, brother.
Luigi nodded, as he thought over everything that he had been through to get to this part. Saving Cobal, rising up against Boom Boom, freeing Mushroom City and battling Roy, the second battle of Toad Town and the conflict over the Blooper Sea, his terrible battle with the mind-controlled Mario and the final showdown at New Donk City, back when it was called Koopa Central. It had been a hard, rough journey, but now it was finally over, and there was peace.
Let's make to toast to the Mushroom Kingdom, Mario.
Luigi said, raising his glass.
You're right, Luigi. To the Mushroom Kingdom, to the princesses and to the best rival anyone could ask for. And to all the adventures we had together.
The two brothers clinked their glasses together, the glass catching the sun's light as it set upon a free, peaceful kingdom. Stone Shell Prison had been repaired and its cells reinforced with both technology and magic, revolutionary techniques that had been learned from analyzing the secret blueprints left behind by Ludwig and Seven Stars. As the Mario brothers walked down one of the dimly lit hallways, they passed several cells containing notorious international criminals, including their uncle, Giovanni. That wasn't the cell they were visiting, however. The cell they were visiting was at the end of a long hall, protected by powerful magical wards and made of steel thick enough to shrug off a bombardment of king bills. As the brothers approached, the thick door slowly slid open, spilling light onto the darkened hall.
"Hello, my sons,"
Antonio said, seated upon the simple bench that was the only bit of furniture in his cell aside from his bed.
"Hello, Dad,"
Luigi said. He still had trouble looking his father in his cold eyes. They had visited him several times, so far. Perhaps, with time, they had finally come to understand each other.
"Hey,"
Mario said, taking something out of his overalls pocket.
"I brought something for you."
Antonio stuck his hand out of the bars and took the small picture from Mario, gazing at the old photo of the young, brown-haired woman. A slight smile appeared. The closest to a genuine smile Luigi had ever seen on him.
"Thank you, Mario and Luigi,"
he finally said.
"Thank you."
There was something like sadness in those cold blue eyes, and Luigi smiled. That was the first time his father had ever spoken kindly towards him. The brothers turned around as the door began to close. Their visits with Antonio were seldom long, as the former Grand Star seldom had anything to say. But not this time.
"Your mother,"
Antonio said as the iron doors slowly began to shut,
"would have loved you."
They turned around, staring at their father.
"Maybe one day you can tell us about her,"
Luigi replied. Antonio smiled sadly again.
"Mario, Luigi, this world you have created. Perhaps this kind of peace is not so bad."
The doors shut with a clank that echoed through the room, shutting him off from sight. Mario and Luigi turned around and began to walk back out, their footsteps echoing through the empty hall.
"You're right, Dad,"
Luigi thought.
"This peace isn't so bad. We may have stopped your world of silence, but a quiet life. Yeah, I'd like that. Because, really, now, at long last, we saved the world."
Thank you, everyone, for all your support for this fanfiction, which I've been working on for nearly 2 years. I'd especially like to thank those people responsible for the creation of the Fallen Kingdom TV Tropes page. This story is the result of a great deal of ideas I'd had, and existed in several different forms before the version I ended up posting. The initial plot was actually somewhat inspired by the anime series Code Geass, although in the end the only similarity Fallen Kingdom shares with it is that it involves a revolution against an empire. There were loads of prototype ideas I'd scrapped from this story that I'd like to share with you, for fun. For example, the very first concept for Fallen Kingdom involved it being 10 books long, each one only about 20,000 words. However, there was no time skip to 20 years in the future, and Mario never died. The main plot involved Morton Koopa Sr. coming back to life and rebuilding his Koopa Empire, and all the characters coming together and stopping him. Later on, the Seven Stars organization and Antonio would be revealed manipulating things behind the scenes. The board of directors was considerably different in this version, as it included characters such as Diner, a rough-natured Yoshi who was sort of a prototype for Cobalt, and Lord Draconis, an anthropomorphic dragon who was supposed to be Bowser's ancient ancestor, the leader of an extinct species of dragon people who interbred with Koopas to create the larger, fire-breathing ones. In the end, however, it would be revealed that Antonio was really being used by Dimencio, of all people, who managed to survive at the end of Super Paper Mario and is attempting to obtain the Grand Dark Star, the source of the Shadow Queen's power, so that he could become all-powerful. During one part in the story, there was going to be a rematch battle of sorts between King Morton and Antonio, which was going to be quite emotional, with Morton finally choosing his family over power, which unfortunately never made it into the final version. The climax of the story would involve Mario obtaining the Grand Light Star to become all-powerful and battling Shadow Dimencio, until Bowser sacrifices himself to finally kill Dimencio by ramming the Comet Observatory into him. As you can tell, the plot changed wildly, although the fact that the story would end with Bowser's heroic sacrifice remained consistent. Eventually, I realized the flaws with my story and created a new version of sorts, which would be called the Mario Finale Trilogy and consist of 3 longer books. I never really made up too much about this story, except that it would begin with Morton's resurrection. The big difference with this story is that Skull's Fortescue is the main antagonist, and is given a very complicated backstory which somehow makes him responsible for nearly everything bad that happened in the Mario universe, with him manipulating Antonio in 7 Stars and also manipulating Morton in the Koopa War, as well as in the modern day with Morton's Koopa Kingdom Revitalization Front, KKRF organization. His motivation for doing this is that he is, in fact, thousands of years old and a prince of the Koopas, but was passed on his inheritance because he did not inherit Dragon Koopa genes. Additionally, Skulls had split his soul into 3 parts, Skulls Fortescue, who supported King Morton, Skulls Fogtop, who was the Prime Minister of the Cap Kingdom, for some reason, I dunno how that fit into the plot, and Skulls Phantasmus, who was the true leader of 7 Stars. In addition to all of that, there was the true Skulls Koopa, who resided in a palace in another dimension. The climax would involve Mario taking on Skulls, who somehow became a god who resembled a combination of a Shinto war god, due to the Koopa Kingdom's Japanese influence in Odyssey, and Bowser, who has the name of Amatsuma Kabashi Skulls. There would be one time where Antonio sacrifices himself heroically by smashing his warship into Skulls to distract him, and the battle would finish by Bowser's sacrifice, in the end, just like in all the other versions. It's probably for the best that I scrapped this version, because if you don't understand what's up with Skulls, that's perfectly okay since I don't either. Anyways, I later got the idea to create what I hoped was my best concept yet, the story that I ended up posting. Of course, there were loads of scrapped concepts for Fallen Kingdom, as well. The most notable of these was that I considered having Ludwig bring old villains like Cacletta, Fawful, Phantasma, and even his grandfather Morton Koopa Sr. back from the dead to help him, although this was scrapped because I just couldn't manage to fit it into the plot. Yoshi was also always supposed to die. It was a pretty last-minute decision that he lived. I planned for Yoshi to go down slamming some kind of fighter plane into General Flame's gunship, killing both of them, but in the end I decided that it would be better if Yoshi lived so he could better atone for his crimes and recover his reputation. It didn't seem right to me that Yoshi would die still being known by most of the world best as the destroyer of Neon City. Billy, the yellow toad of the Toad Brigade, I initially envisioned as one of the main protagonists and even imagined him battling Antonio with Cobal and Luigi on the observatory. In the end, his role got cut massively because I just couldn't think of a reason for him to be with Cobal or Luigi most of the time, and as such he didn't get enough character development to warrant a big role in the later parts. Really, there are a lot of things I wish I could have expanded more on, mainly Mario being the red star, considering he only really is on 7 Stars' side for one chapter. Additionally, Koops is introduced as leading an elite force composed of ex-Glitz Pit fighters, but that never actually came into play because I straight up forgot about them. I was also surprised about how many people expected Giovanni to put up more of a fight against Larry. He was never supposed to be too strong, likely even Krizina and Snadlash were stronger, he just was higher rank because of his technological intelligence. I'm well aware of all the typos as well, most infamously one where Skulls orders Mario to kill Mario, the reason for their existence being that I posted every chapter immediately after I finished writing it with no proofreading whatsoever. While Fallen Kingdom is far from a perfect story, I'm so glad so many people were able to enjoy it. Your reviews and the success it enjoyed on this site are super encouraging to me as a writer, and I'm glad that you were able to help make it one of S top Mario stories. I probably won't post on this account again, because I'm planning on focusing my writing on non-fanfiction works at the moment, with the aim of getting a novel published through a legitimate publishing house. Either way, I hope you all enjoyed my take on the Mario universe, and I wish you all the best in your future endeavors.